right, folks, I'm here with a photographer. His name is Steven Brokaw. Steve Brokaw.
Yeah.
His website is stevenbrokawphotography.com. And Steven came to me by way of Valerie Jardin. Steven, how do you pronounce her name?
Jardin.
See, Jardin. There you go. So Valerie connected us, and I'm glad she did, because Steve is an amazing photographer and does the kind of work that I like shooting. so I get the chance to pick his brain about model photography and that sort of thing. But also, you have an awesome blog there, and he did a write-up on mirrorless versus, or actually, this sort of mirrorless versus full frame, and when you might want to use the two, because you shoot both. So I thought this would be a perfect time to have that kind of conversation. So welcome to the show, Steven.
Thanks. Appreciate it. This is going to be great.
Yeah, this is exciting. So let's start off with you. Just a little background on you. So you're in Indianapolis, Indiana. And you, one of the reasons for this interview is because you are one of the photographers, like many of our listeners, I'm sure, that straddle the line between corporate regular job during the day, 9 to 5, and then at night you put on your cape and you're a superhero photographer, right? So take me through that. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's been something that I've been doing for quite a while. I am a professional guy. I work in a finance department of a large international company that's actually headquartered in LA. And so I've been a photographer, and it's gotten to the point now that I'm an empty nester. The photography has just really taken off, and spend probably as much time now than I ever have in photography. So it's usually after normal office hours and on weekends. Yeah. And I've just been focusing almost exclusively on street photography, but primarily on model photography in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Now, is the goal for you to one day to just kill the corporate job completely and go full-time photography, or is it just a nice peaceful yin-yang coexistence? You know, you get to do this when you have your creative release, and then you got the day job for stability and consistency and all that.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how much better it is to have a day job when you're doing photography, because it's not a cheap endeavor. So, no, the plan is right now that, I like to do the day job because it pays the bills. Yeah. I do photography because I enjoy it. But ultimately, as time goes, the idea is to be better and better at photography, and hopefully one day that would be my primary role. Yeah.
Do you keep the two separate? In other words, do the folks at work know that you're this, high-powered fashion photographer guy?
Yeah, they do. I have a pretty large staff, so they all know I do this. But I completely keep it separate. Don't mix the two. I don't let people from work on my Facebook page. Most people read my blog, but that's they kind of joke around with it. But it's pretty much separate. Yeah, at least for now. At least for now. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the mirrorless versus full frame. And I'm one of the people that reads your blog, so I was reading it, and I know you have some opinions on when to use one or the other. And you shoot with I've got it down here, Fujifilm X20, and on the micro four thirds or the mirrorless side, and then on the other side, you're a Nikon full frame shooter. So tell me, demystify what you're shooting on the Nikon side, and then take me through your mindset as to why you'd want to use one or the other.
Yeah, I've recently switched about a year ago to the Nikon D600, so I'm shooting full frame, and that's almost exclusively in studio now. So I like it because it's fast, it focuses very quickly. I like the full frame nature of the studio work because it allows me more flexibility in cropping and just getting the tonal range a little bit better. And it's not really an ISO issue, but then I've purchased this X20 really about 6 months ago, and I've just fallen in love with it. It's almost exclusive what I use now for street photography. I carry it in my car whenever I go on a business trip. It's in my briefcase. Yeah. And it's been just an amazing, amazing camera. As a matter of fact, I went on a workshop with Valerie a few months ago, and that's pretty much all I used. The second and third day the quality is just amazing. So what I've found is that for studio work, until they come up with a really kind of a full frame Nikon that's a mirrorless camera, I'm going to stay with the DSLR. And for just casual shooting, the the X20s work perfectly for me. And, that's the right size. It's not a pocket type camera, but it is a camera that's good enough to, keep in a bag, and it's a light traveling camera, so I really love it. But I'm
not familiar with that camera. Is the X20? Does that have interchangeable lenses, or is it a fixed lens?
No, that's why I got it. It's got a zoom lens. It's quite small. Little guy.
Okay, yeah.
It's like the little cousin of the X100S.
Okay.
Lot smaller form factor. It's got a fixed zoom lens, so you can't take it off, and it's got all the functionality of the X100S. So it's a nice little camera. It's very fast. I really enjoy it.
How much was that thing?
It was about $600.
Okay.
$699, I think it was.
Yeah, so half the X100S.
Half.
Yeah.
And it was available too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, I'm still licking those wounds of not being able to get an X100S.
Yeah, well, I checked. I did a lot of research. I looked at the Olympus, the OMDs. I looked at the Fujifilm cameras. I looked at the Pentexes. I looked at them all. And what I really liked is the fact that it does have an optical viewfinder. So it's perfect for what I do, because I like to put it up to my eye. I don't like holding the camera out like this to compose. So it's worked out perfectly. So
being a studio shooter, like you are the quintessential sort of studio shooter. You're shooting models in a studio environment, full frame Nikon camera, lights, camera, action, all that stuff.
Right.
And you also have the mirrorless on the Fuji side. Why? Not from the standpoint of the fixed zoom lens on the X20 that you have, but on the mirrorless side, say with the Micro Four Thirds, interchangeable lenses and being able to switch and do that sort of thing. Why wouldn't you? What's the argument against moving to the smaller sensor size mirrorless? Or in other words, what's the argument for staying with a mirrored full frame?
There's really no argument today. The cameras are getting so good. All my lights can be triggered using my electronic triggers. So as long as you have a hot shoe, you're good to go. Yeah. And I know several people that use Micro Four Thirds and use the mirrorless cameras perfectly. And really, it's just the fact that I've got the D600. I've been a DSLR shooter forever. And it would be a challenge if I ever upgraded and got rid of the DSLR and looked at something else. I would definitely look at a mirrorless camera. But right now, it's what I have. Yeah. It's my workflow. I'm familiar with it. I know where all the buttons are. Yeah. It's like my right hand. So,
and in the end, why? Like, why would you change if because you're looking at your work? It's amazing work. Why would you, if you're already generating awesome work and you've got that muscle memory down and the workflow down and all that? Change for change's sake doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Now, if your camera was broken and you were like, okay, it's time to move to something else, I'm going to use this opportunity, then you might consider it, right?
Yeah, I might, but I've invested so much in the Nikon lenses.
Oh, the lenses, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to switch. I mean, the quality to the 70 to 200 or just the 50 millimeter in studio is amazing. Yeah. So it would be tough to change. But I would definitely look at it, especially if Nikon came up with a mirrorless camera that was full frame. I'd be looking at it.
Yeah. Well, they might. Sony's cranking up the heat on that with their A7 and A7R full frame mirrorless. So they threw the gauntlet down. So we'll see what Nikon and Canon do.
Yeah, I read those cameras are awesome. So it's just a matter of time for Nikon to catch on, I think.
Yeah, which is unfortunate that they have to catch on. They should be leading, not catching on. That's a whole nother story.
No, let's not go there.
Yeah, let's not go. Okay, so you mentioned studio. So do you have your own studio, or so how does all that work?
Yeah, there's a what I would call an industrial complex in Indianapolis. And they have part of it is an artist colony. And what they've done is they've rented out about a third of the building. It's huge. It's enormous for studio space. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine were actually in a gallery probably about 2 years ago. And we're just talking, so we'd love to have a studio space. And the guy who had the gallery said there's a room that's basically open right next to him. And so we leased it out and turned it into a studio and got a couple of other guys to join us over the last year. And so there's 4 photographers in this one 1,800 square foot studio. Mm-hmm. And it's great because it's got a sitting area, it's got a gallery, it's got a kitchen, it's got a storeroom, and it's got a shooting area. And so it's I probably use it 2 days a week, and then at least once on the weekend. And it's close to the office, so it's easy to stop over there. Yeah. And we've got a Google calendar, and we just sync up when we're going to be there. And we have a lease on it, and it's worked out amazing because it's so much cheaper than renting studio space.
Yeah. So you guys take that whatever the rent is for that space and divide it by 4, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, everybody's happy. We have one guy who does the lease, and the rest of us have a business agreement with them. And what we do every month, we just pay them 1/4 of the lease, and we just use it as we do. And then we have gallery openings, and we have photographers that come in town and show their photography every month at first Friday of the month. And it's really amazing. It's so much better than like shooting in your basement or your garage or having to rent a place.
Right. Yeah. And just having, especially, I'm going to transition this into models in a second, but having models go to a physical sort of studio location, I'm sure is better than saying, hey, come to my house and I'm going to shoot you, which, a lot of people do. I've done that, but it's still, a lot of people do it, but it's just a different sort of mindset of saying, hey, meet me at my studio at 6:00, rather than come to my house. Yeah.
It's nice, and it's getting a little bit of buzz in town because we've had it for about 3 years, and people kind of recognize the name now, and so you can say, "Hey, we shoot at this studio," and they kind of know where it's at, and it makes it so much easier. It's a place to store all of our equipment, so I don't have to tote that with me. So it's been very, very good. It's probably the best move that I've made in the last 2 years from a photography standpoint.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. There's something about the physical studio that just, you're having all your stuff there and you just go and you shoot and you dream up new shoots to do. And it's comfortable, especially if the kitchen and the bathroom and all that stuff there for changing. It's just, have a little wine on the counter. It's all good.
Right? We'll go without the wine with these young models. Though.
That could probably, no. So let's talk about that. So with the models, what's the business model and what's your ultimate goal out of this? Are you building a business around shooting models and they're coming to you, giving you money to shoot them? Or are you building your portfolio and you're saying, hey, model, come let me shoot you and I'll give you some prints or I'll pay you? What's your ultimate goal?
Yeah, it originally started off just shooting for themes. So I'd have a certain theme, a certain fashion look. Maybe I'd shoot a certain color. And so I would start doing it was all basically personal projects to start. But then I started to get, my portfolio was developed. And so what started to happen probably about a year ago was where models would actually reach out to me. And they say, hey, I like your style. I'd like to shoot with you. I'd like to possibly, do a test shoot. A lot of TFP work where I wouldn't charge.
Define TFP.
Time for prints. So basically, I'm not being charged for my services and the model's not being paid for her services either. So there's an agreement that I will shoot a model for 2 hours and give her maybe 10 images for a portfolio. And in return, I get to shoot a model and put that quality work usually in my portfolio. Yeah.
And who owns the rights to those images? You or the model?
The photographer always does. Okay. Even if you sign a model release, I've never given up rights to the images. So I'll let them, I don't watermark any of my work. I'll let them basically use them for whatever, as long as they don't crop them, unless it's for a Facebook picture or they don't manipulate them. They can basically do what they want with them as long as as long as we have that agreement up front. And so generally speaking, what's happened now is that I get a lot of models that reach out to me through Facebook or email and say, I'm going to be in town or local. I'd like to shoot with you. And so, you usually look at what they've done in the past, if there's any skill set. And then based upon that, I'll schedule something and we'll shoot. So like I've got a test shoot tomorrow. And then usually do maybe 3 or 4 a month, just raw, fresh models that have just started out and do a test shoot for them. And then occasionally, usually a couple times a month, they'll reach out to me and it's actually, I'm saying, look, you need to pay me for this. So I've got a pricing model and their portfolio.
And what is the pricing model? What are you charging these folks?
What I do is it's because I'm fairly new to it. It's $50 for basically per hour for a sitting fee.
Okay.
So you come into the studio. It's $50 an hour, which is generally the low end of the scale. Again, because fairly new to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that, you get a certain number of images. But if you want more, there's a cost per image.
Okay.
Most shoots usually run between 2 to 3 hours. So generally what you're looking at is $50 an hour for 3 hours.
Okay. And then the deliverable is it an online gallery, or are you giving them a disc, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I have an online gallery. So basically it's a secure, passworded, protected gallery. Mm-hmm. They go in and select the ones they want. Yeah. So I'll put my watermark across the center of it. They select the ones they want, and then I will process those. And then as soon as they select them, they either take them from the gallery, or I'll email them or Dropbox them to them. So it's usually an electronic delivery.
Okay. Got it. And that's who's doing that? SmugMug, Zenfolio?
Yeah, I use SmugMug for the gallery.
Okay.
And then that seems to work out really, really well. It's quick, it's simple. And then Dropbox, of course, is quite easy for delivery.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I've seen a lot of photographers start using Dropbox because it's so easy. You just basically drag a bunch of images into a folder, and it makes a gallery out of them, and you share that link, and it's done. Right?
Yep. It's easy.
No uploading and this. It's just the problem with the Dropbox piece is you can't do the passwording. You can just, it's security through obscurity, so they have to know the link to get to it, but they can share it out and all that. But still, it's a path of least resistance, right?
No, it works perfectly, actually. We've started to use that more and more, but right now, SmugMug is the main way that we create the gallery. We put it up there. I usually leave them for about a month, and then after they've selected their images, I take the gallery down. Yeah. So it works out really well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Mm-hmm. Okay, then so we've got the professional side of things. So when you're finding models to shoot, just for like you want to build out and round out your portfolio, where are they coming from? Are they in the local area? Are you using Model Mayhem? How does that work?
Yeah, I used Model Mayhem at start. But I really didn't get a lot of success with that, simply because 3 years ago, you really, in this industry, you really need to have a reputation and you need some experience. So I started off Model Mayhem, did very poorly with that. So it was basically through word of mouth, through makeup artists would recommend people, friends of friends. And then once I got that established, then most of the local talent we get through Facebook. Mm-hmm. So they'll reach out through me, either through my personal or my business Facebook page. And then recently I'd say the last year, I've actually started to work with agencies, because then you're working with models that are actually skilled and they know how to pose. They have a certain look that you're looking for. Yeah. And working with agencies is good, but it's tough.
Tough in what way?
Well, if you're going to do a TFP shoot, there has to be some benefit for the agency. Rarely will they give the quality talent if it's just, hey, come on down to my studio and I want to shoot you for my portfolio. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing something like I'm doing a shoot for a magazine Sunday, and there was no problem at all getting a model through an agency with that, simply because you say it's going to be a published shot. So if there's something in return, it's fairly easy, but most of the agencies, they want a fairly, for the good talent, you have to pay.
Right. And what's that? I was going to ask that. So the return could be, like you're saying, the magazine shoot, so it's exposure at that point. So the model can say, hey, I posed in X magazine, here's my tear sheet. Right. If it's TFP, it's just an exchange back and forth, and I can see how an agency would say they'd put you at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of what you're going to get and if you're going to get somebody. But then the great equalizer is cash, right? So you just say, hey, I need a blonde. She's got to look like this, and this body style, and I'm willing to pay how much. And so what generally, in your experience, is that how much? What would you be paying?
For an experienced model, it's usually about $150 an hour or up.
Okay. So $300 for a 2-hour shoot then.
Yeah, and usually there's minimums, minimum 2-hour minimum, almost always. Generally speaking, locally, if it's talent from here in town, it's anywhere from $50 to $75 an hour. Yeah. So it is not a cheap endeavor, but I mean that's why the day job is really nice to have. So
Yeah. So you can fund it. It's your own personal Kickstarter campaign, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So what about when you're coming up with the idea? So I was looking through your site and all the it's beautiful fashion. The black and white stuff is stunning, by the way. Congratulations on that. So how do you come up with the ideas for these shoots? Are you just sort of sitting there and like watching TV and you're like, I want to do a shot like this, and and sketch it out and then build it and find the model, or is it more serendipitous?
Yeah, there's absolutely no problem with that at all because I have probably, when it comes to photography, I've got ADD. I mean, I've got 1,000 ideas. I look at fashion magazines. I read books on photography. I look at different websites. I read blogs. And you get an idea. So what I'll generally do is I'll just either tear images out of a magazine or I'll copy some images from a website. I look at Pinterest. I talk to other photographers. I follow certain photographers, and then I get an idea. And then generally what I'll do is that I'll decide which one I'm going to work on. And then I schedule, generally at that time, I'll reach out to a makeup artist and find the makeup artist I want. And then we'll find a model. And it's generally, you do it specifically on the look. So if you want somebody with long black hair and size 2, then you're going to find somebody like that. And so you put out a casting call either through an agency or through Facebook. And before you know it, you'll get a few people. And sometimes you'll get, the redhead 5'2" gal, or you'll every once in a while get the perfect person. Right. And then
not that there's anything wrong with redheaded 5'2" gals, but if you're looking for a 6 foot tall blonde person and the redhead 5'2" shows up, you got a problem.
Right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a 5'2" redheaded gal.
Yes.
No, the thing is, though, is that what I'll do is that then I'll come up with a concept, and then I will actually share the concept with the model to make sure that she's aware of it. Then we'll exchange photographs electronically. Hey, this is the image we're trying to get. I'll usually create a comp card or a book, and I'll send it to them. And then they'll look at it and say, hey, yeah, I'm interested in this. And then we'll agree to it. And we decide if there's going to be fashion brought in or hey, bring these type of clothes. And then we agree on a date to the studio, and then we show up and we start going at it. And usually what I'll do is I'll go in the night before to make sure the studio is properly set up, get the lighting set up. Because the worst thing you can do is have somebody come in and you're spending, a half hour getting your lighting set up or getting the backdrop set up. So
don't be that
I
guy.
generally come in prepared. Yeah.
No, well, when you're shooting, is it just you and the model, or is it you, the model, hair and makeup, or an assistant, or what's the crew look like?
Yeah, today it's almost always the model, a makeup artist, a hairstylist, and about half of the shoots now bring in fashion. Either it's local fashion or we get it pulled from the different stores. So I would say probably at minimum 3 people in a studio at any one time. Okay. I'll get an assistant occasionally, but usually it's an assistant when it's a big shoot and I need somebody to take notes or I'm shooting tethered. Yeah. But more than likely, I'm not using an assistant. So usually 3 to 4 people.
So how does that work money-wise then? So doing the math, if it's a 2-hour shoot and say you're paying the model and it's not an agency model, so which means, or even if the model's paying you, it's a 2 to 3 hour shoot, so at $50 an hour. And then you've got a staff there. How are those folks working on TFP as well? Because it seems like you'd be in the negative at some point there, charging so not at $50 an hour.
Yeah, I would love to say that I'm making tons of money, but this is really a break-even proposition, right? Yeah, the makeup artist always gets paid. Only on shoots for submissions to magazines will they do that for TFP, but I can't think of maybe 1 or 2 times that I've not paid the makeup artist. Yeah. You always pay the hairstylist. You always pay the fashion to come in, again, unless it's published work. Yeah. So almost always it's a break-even proposition.
And where are you finding those folks, the makeup artist and the hair person?
They're all local. They're people that I have 2 makeup artists that I use almost all the time. Okay. Because their style, they know my style. It tends to be pretty similar all the time. Yeah. The hairstyle is pretty much the same way. I pretty much use just one person all the time. Yeah. And then we have about 4 or 5 people we use to bring in fashion. And most of the fashion, they pull it from the local department store, so they have a cache themselves.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I've heard the tip that go to the mall and go to the Mac store in the mall and solicit the makeup artists in there. But then a lot of models don't like Mac, so it's interesting. So that's really good advice. So speaking of advice, to round this out, so other photographers that are earlier in the path than you are, that are like, what, I want to get into this. I'd like to shoot models in my non-corporate time and have a studio and be where Steven is. What advice would you give to them to sort of start moving in that direction?
Yeah, Frederick, don't start with a studio. I mean, that's an expense immediately. If you're going to do this, then rent a studio space, use your garage, use your basement, use a friend's studio, because that's an expense that you're going to have constantly. And until you get established, you're not going to make enough money to cover your cost of that. So don't start with a studio. Secondly is just practice. Just practice. Develop your portfolio. Don't just put anything up there. Just find the absolute best stuff that you do and put it out there. Make contacts, network heavily, develop your name in the industry, in the local market. And then before you know it, then you can start looking at a studio. But what I've always learned, and one of the things that I've found is the best for me, is that by default, I'm a business guy. So this is really a business first. And I think that you need to always remember that, it's an expensive business. So watch your P's and Q's, watch your pennies. Don't go into debt. Don't buy that latest camera if you don't need it.
It's easy to get out of hand, and it's easy to rationalize in your head that you need that latest camera.
There is absolutely nothing in this hobby or this business that is cheap. It is so expensive.
Right. Yeah, nothing. Yeah, I was trying to think of something that's cheap. Nothing. Nothing is cheap. Nothing. That's great. So one last question before I let you go here. Lighting wise, in the studio, what are you using for lights? What brand?
Yeah, I'm exclusively an Elinchron shooter.
Okay.
So I have the
photographer today that I've interviewed that's
really?
at Elinchron. Wow.
Well, I started off with that because I had Elinchron triggers, and a lot of the studio strobes have the triggers, the receivers inside of them.
Yeah.
So I shoot Elinchrons, the RX and the BR series, and then I have all the Rotolux modifiers. So basically all the soft boxes of beauty dishes you can imagine. And the fact that I'm shooting with 3 other photographers, our studio is full of anything you'd ever want.
I bet. So but I can imagine the shot planning session when you're like, okay, so I'm going to use this octabox and this head, and I'm going to put this reflector here and this background, and the whole 9 yards. Yeah,
it's that's probably the most challenging thing, is really to determine what you want to do and how you're going to light it. I've got my base set of lighting that I'm going to do every time, and then I build from that. But you got to get it right, because if you're in studio, you have one light the wrong place, and all of a sudden, hey, where'd that shadow come from? Or you've blown out a highlight. It just doesn't work. So you've really got to get it down.
Are you doing multiple lights setups or just one?
Yeah, I generally use 2 lights. Usually it's a beauty dish or a large 43 or 60-inch softbox, and then I usually have a hair light on top.
Okay.
So I've got this huge Manfrotto Super Boom, and it has the Elinchron light right on top, so it gives you a nice hair light. So it's usually 2. Nice. Occasionally you'll throw a light on the background if you want to blow it out for high key, but rarely more than 2.
How are you triggering those? Through wireless? Yeah,
it's through an Elinchron, the Skyport triggers.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah,
very cool. See, sounds like you're firing on all cylinders. So
It's been fun. It's been quite a trip.
Yeah, I can tell how passionate you are about photography, and I haven't heard much about the corporate job. I'm just saying, I haven't heard much excitement there.
Well, I'm hoping none of my work colleagues hear this then.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I see what's coming. That's cool. Well, congratulations on all your success. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. This has been very educational and a little depressing, because when I talk to folks like you that are doing it, I'm like, oh man, I want a studio. I want to be Steven. So
it's been great. It's been great. It's been perfect for what I'm doing, and I would recommend it to anyone.
Very cool. All right. And where, so I mentioned at the top, you're at StevenBrokawPhotography.com. You want to spell that out for us?
Right. It's StevenBrokaw photography.com. It's a Squarespace site. And then you can always find me on Facebook. I'm really active on Facebook, both on Steven Brokaw Photography for my business side and just Steve Brokaw on the other side. And if you want to know about me, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Steven, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I love TWiP. It's great.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
You take care.